throughout the day. So for those people who absolutely have to travel, and we're very much stressing that to customers, please only make a journey if you have to. It will ensure that we can maintain social distancing on board.
And finally this hour, the world's oldest man has had to cancel his 112th birthday celebrations tomorrow because of the coronavirus outbreak. Bob Waiton from Hampshire in the UK only took up the title of the oldest man in the world last month after the previous holder died. Mr. Waiton, who was born in Hull on the 29th of March 1908, was 10 years old during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, which killed between 50 and 100 million people. That's your news update. It's 3:02.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. Need to renew your AA car insurance? Go to the aa.ie/myAA.
Cold and dry tonight with long clear spells, especially in the north of the country. Lowest temperatures between -2 and 0 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power. The greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
And you're very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of Off the Ball's Neil Treacy, a football correspondent of the Irish Independent, Dan McDonnell, and Johnny Ward, the journalist and broadcaster. Remember, our football coverage brought to you thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. 53106 for your text messages. Really looking forward to this segment of the show. Well, all segments of the show, but this one especially, because over the next few weeks, so we started off last week with the 1982. We're reviewing World Cup years and picking a year and reviewing it and watching the Amazon Prime video during the week of it. So this year, France, 1998, won by the hosts, France, back 22 years ago now. We're streaming this live as well, so you can get in touch, not only on text on 53106, but on the Off the Ball social channels, at Off the Ball on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. So Sean Bean narrates the film La Coupe de la Gloire. That's my pidgin French. And what I remember about the tournament was Martin O'Neill and Robbie Williams in the BBC studios, après-match for the first time. Glorious weather. I don't think it even rained then back in France in 1998 for the whole month. And 32 teams for the first time and some brilliant moments. Where were you guys in your lives back then? I remember I was a student, and I was kind of a student that dipped in. I was one of those phases when I was kind of a little bit out of sport for about a year or two. And I remember just being a really hot summer in 1998 and enjoying being a student.
All right, Sean, I'll take it up first. I was 8 years old for France 98, just gone 8. And I do actually think, like, France 98, 2002, and probably just about to a lesser extent 2006 in Germany, they were the 3 World Cups that I was absolutely 100% all in on football for. I would say mostly France 98, though. It was before I'd properly discovered rugby as well, John. So I was a football man to the core at that point.
It all went wrong, Neil.
Did you ever properly discover rugby?
When did I?
Does anyone ever really properly discover rugby? I mean, you're either born into it or you're not, surely.
No. Well, I mean, like, I grew up in Limerick. My dad's a Kerry man, so the Gaelic football was kind of bed into me. And my granddad was a big football man. And it was probably only as I got a bit older. So there was no real rugby in the family. So it was only as I kind of got a bit older and the other friends started playing rugby as well that I got into it. But to go back to it, as I was saying, I was 8 at the time for France 98 and I was just all in. Like USA 94, that was too early for me. Even Euro 96 was probably a little bit early for me. I would have only been 6. But at 8, I was football obsessed. And like Ronaldo was the man at the time, wasn't he? It was Ronaldo's World Cup, or at least it was meant to be. So I was pretty much just watching every single game non-stop over the course of that. I remember so well, even vividly, like just particular games where I was. I remember midway through the tournament, it was the day of the Argentina and Holland game. Myself and my brother went over to Germany to visit my uncle who was living over in Dusseldorf at the time. And I remember we didn't get to see the Argentina-Holland game because we were flying over on that day. And I remember even watching the semi-finals. I remember seeing Germany's exit when we were over there. I remember specific games, watching them over in Germany. And even remember the World Cup final. I was in the Grand Hotel in Tremor watching it with my dad.
Wow.
It's funny, the pre-tournament talking points were that Brazil were champions, West Germany were European champions, now Germany, of course. But Ireland, just one of those things. It's Mick McCarthy's first campaign, and now we're probably going to face in the next couple of years his last campaign. Romania were 10 points clear of us in the group, and then we went to a playoff against Belgium. Ray Houghton, in almost like a swan song moment, scoring in Brussels. Dennis Irwin scored in the first leg, a 1-1 draw. But Luke Nealis was really our nemesis that year, he was scoring twice. And we didn't make it to the World Cup in France in Mick's first campaign.
Yeah, and I think, John, there's actually a documentary of that time, McCarthy's game. It's actually available on YouTube. He gave access to that, great behind-the-scenes access to that campaign, and probably gave a real insight into his character at that stage and some of the sort of disappointments of that campaign. The Macedonia one would probably stand out over and above the others, but even just his little war with pundits and, Mick McCarthy, he's always probably had an awareness of his critics and loved to silence his critics, and it's followed him throughout his career in England. And you can see it. I mean, people have a lot of time in their hands now, as they know, and that I think someone put it up on YouTube, that documentary, McCarthy's game. But yeah, I mean, it was obviously, I think Ireland would obviously have been sort of reasonably well seeded, having had a good run, sort of in terms of the previous 4 major tournaments, pretty much either qualifying or being thereabouts. But it seemed like that campaign just had a lot of false starts and that sort of familiar playoff pain, which became the staple of the first couple of years of his tenure. Because I think, remember, Dennis Irwin scored that amazing free kick. Dennis Irwin was always my favourite player when I was a kid, and he scored that free kick against Belgium to put Ireland ahead. And we had a couple of those, and in Turkey for the Euros, wasn't it? Robbie Keane put Ireland ahead, and they went ahead in the playoffs, gave away the lead, and didn't get it done in the second leg, which was almost back-to-back playoff disappointments.
Yeah, the group stage, guys. Daniel, you put out a tweet there about an hour or two ago, and the response of people was just overwhelming about like all the things that happened, especially in the group stage, like the Jamaican jerseys. I remember the Romanians dyeing their hair blonde, all of them making it a nightmare for commentators with having a bet with the manager if they won their first 2 games. Brazil starting off against Scotland. It was just a really glorious start to the tournament.
Yeah, and it's funny how you said there, it brings you back to a place in time, and Neil spoke about it, and I'm pretty sure, Johnny and me are pretty much the same age, and we would have probably known each other just around then. So, I definitely remember it was a sunny summer. Brazil-Scotland was the first day of the junior start, or certainly if it wasn't the first day of the junior start, it was the first day or two. And I saw someone did respond to me saying it was English, and that was my recollection of getting home from the exam, and the Brazil-Scotland game was ongoing at the time. And so the first, the group stages would have overlapped with my junior start. So I sort of remember most of it, if not all of it. But it is, people, it is funny how those World Cups still function as it brings you back. And some people responses that were away in America or, wherever they might have been at that moment. But for me, it's a very, very warm Irish summer, and spending probably too much of it indoors watching some of this World Cup. And that group stage, the Nigeria-Spain game, because I did watch the official film back today, and that's almost like cheating because it refreshes some memories. But before looking at that Nigeria-Spain game was one where Nigeria won, and we all had this thing that maybe this African team might actually do it until they got unceremoniously dumped out by the Danes. But there's a lot going on in the groups, definitely.
Yeah, Tommaso Flaherty was tweeting in, I started the Leaving Cert the day the Brazil-Scotland game, left the exam, raced downtown with my classmates to watch Ronaldo do his thing. I think it was the first time we saw him on TV. Funny, Johnny, that France didn't have Cantona and England didn't have Gaza.
Yeah, and it was obviously England, back in a major tournament, Ireland having qualified for the 2 not getting there. And as you mentioned, no Cantona. Zidane probably didn't actually have an unbelievable tournament. He was sent off, missed a couple of games. Obviously, the 2 headers was just so unusual for a player of his technical, brilliance to score 2 headers in that final. That final that was probably overshadowed by Ronaldo. This tournament's funny because I kind of slightly got into the habit of watching a couple of these tournament reels the last week. So I watched the USA '94, and it was incredible. just watching back the Irish team at that time and the confidence the nation had in them, I think it was almost like we expected to qualify for tournaments at that stage. And I know then we missed out in '96, and obviously '98 didn't happen as well. But it seemed like a time when Irish football was on a real high. And the Belgium game, I watched a bit of it back today, and I do remember how badly we defended the goals over in Belgium, and seem to recall at the time that we didn't really deserve to go through. I know a couple of kind of decisions maybe went against in Belgium, but the funny thing about this tournament for me was I spent about 7 or 8 weeks of that summer in the USA. I went over to kind of just spend some time working as a kid and earn a few quid in the States. But that 1998 summer, this tournament was actually completely overshadowed by Galway being in the championship in football, because there was something about that summer where I think there was an expectation when Galway beat Mayo in the first round of the Connacht Championship. John O'Mahony was the manager. I think the whole county got this strange belief that we could actually win the All-Ireland. And I remember going over to the States. I remember distinctly watching the Argentina-England game, and I remember the Beckham-Simeone thing and all that. But I distinctly remember that summer, the most thing I was gutted about was that I was going to miss the Connacht final. So I couldn't go to the Connacht final when Galway played Roscommon. I had to watch it in the States. But it was very interesting being over there at the time. Obviously, football had come on a lot in the US from 4 years previous, and that tournament just had everything. I think, looking back to Dan's tweet, the response of people probably shows off Dan and I our age, because a lot of our followers just are of a similar age and all really have great memories of that tournament. But funnily enough for me, 1998 was more so about Galway winning the All-Ireland, and I was doing my junior cert at the time that year, and they were magic days, it must be said.
Geez, Johnny, we've got another 45 minutes to go here. We need some more World Cup memories from you, you know?
I know.
It's quarter past 3, and you've talked about the USA 94 and your summer in America. Like, nothing on the tournament, you know? Nothing.
No.
Well, the funny thing about it, when you see, things in the past that remind you of things not changing, like, I always thought the Beckham-Simeone thing from that tournament, I thought Beckham, as much as he did a petulant thing, Beckham got abused like endlessly as a Man United player. I remember the following season, absolutely endlessly. But Simeone's absolute play acting for that. And when you think back to Liverpool and Atletico and all the stuff Liverpool had to deal with, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and the leopard doesn't change his spots and all that. But that's probably my main memory of the tournament, the whole Beckham Simeone incident and Michael Owen in that game. They'd be my main highlights.
And Johnny, it's funny, like you were mentioning Simeone, the play acting and stuff like that. What I had completely wiped from my memory was, in their following game in the quarter-final, it was him who was play acting again that basically got Arthur Newman sent off for his second yellow. And I mean, it was a slightly late tackle, but Simeone, it was the most exaggerated, like 10 rolls along the ground, clawing at his foot. And in the end, it's Arthur Newman who got sent off. So it's a bit of play acting that kind of got forgotten because of what had happened in the England game.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't recall that either, but it's funny how, you wouldn't necessarily expect maybe a manager, like, and let's be honest, in Argentinian standards, Simeone was a fairly, he's a functional workman-like midfielder. He would have played with Redondo and players like that who would have been far more technically far superior technically, but Simeone certainly knew how to play the referee, and I don't think that has changed all these years later.
Well, England kind of threw it away. They had a 3-5-2 system, and he was late to pick Owen, I suppose, because of his age, 18. But Owen was just sensational in that game against Argentina, scored that brilliant goal, got tripped for the penalty, which Shearer scored. And if Beckham hadn't been sent off, I think England would have gone through. And it was a real kind of situation where they really threw it away. I thought David Batty missing the penalty in the shootout, and Argentina were tired, I think, by the time they got to play Holland. But I thought it was a talented English team that didn't fulfill their potential.
Yeah, well, there was always a great if only about that English team, because Hoddle probably seemed like he was probably suited to international management in a way. And, you often wonder, I mean, he obviously pressed sort of self-destruct, and he lost his job for sort of, ridiculous comments that he made, and you can't defend that. But it was like... And I think Owen is the most interesting aspect of it, because I know Owen is, in the last couple of years, I think he was in the studio there at one point, I think, with Joe, and I listened to his interview with Jamie Carragher recently as well, which was very honest. And Owen at that point basically thought he was untouchable. He thought he was the best in the world and would remain the best in the world, and now obviously would admit that he he nearly peaked within a year or two of that when the injury started to stack up. And even by the time he won the Ballon d'Or, he was almost past his peak in his head. But he was basically unplayable. And when you look at that England team again, watching it today, I mean, Scholes got that goal against Tunisia. Shearer, I mean, Scholes and Shearer both retired from international football very early, by their age. Owen was done early in terms of actually being impactful. And what you had was probably a team that at the time went home from the tournament thinking next time, when actually maybe that was their time. That was their moment. And I mean, France had Henry and Trezeguet, two teenagers who, they seized that moment, almost like Mbappe last time round. And sometimes, you think it'll be 2 years' time, it'll be different. Or I remember even Ireland came home from 2002. It was a case of in the Phoenix Park talking about winning the next Euros, and it's like, well, no, it's you impressed in that tournament, but you almost had to seize the day when it came. And I know you say that England team probably would have beaten Argentina if Beckham hadn't got sent off, and I see where you're coming from, and on the balance of play in the game and so on. But you just have this feeling they probably wouldn't have. They almost had this ability to lose when they shouldn't have, maybe, and you just couldn't trust them to get the job done. And I mean, that was one of the great games. I mean, even the fact that Zanetti goal from the free kick move, look, that was all in the first half. This was just the first half of the game, and then the Beckham thing happened thereafter, and the Sol Campbell disallowed goal. I forgot the play almost restarted while he was still celebrating. So, but that's probably one of the great World Cup knockout games. But again, England, when it comes to Argentina or Germany or their great rivals, they basically just always lose. I mean, this is what happens.
I remember for the England-Argentina game, like at the time, I was kind of cheering for England in it because I basically knew all the English players because you're following the Premier League and stuff like that. And I was watching it at home. One of my friends was over as well. And I remember about 15, 20 minutes in, my granny noticed that we were cheering for England and actually gave us a bit of a talking to and was trying to explain to us why, no, you want Argentina to win this, okay? Yeah.
Did you see Rory O'Connor's tweet in earlier on, actually?
No.
Yeah, I have it here, Jan. I'll read it out.
Go for it.
Yeah, this is a Daniel McDonnell on Twitter. I was at Denmark for Nigeria won in the last 16, which was amazing. But watching Argentina versus England in a Parisian campsite bar with the Irish-Scots contingent loudly cheering for the Argies was unforgettable. One of the English reps got carried away and started singing No Surrender. A Scotsman I've never seen before or since shouted, "Who sank the Belgrano?" to the loud response of Maggie Thatcher, followed by a hearty Argentina, Argentina, all the way through to the end of the Penos until our friend left with his tail between his legs.
That whole thing is fascinating because I was actually asking a WhatsApp group this morning. One of the guys in the WhatsApp group would be from Northern Ireland. I was asking him, who are you supporting in that game? And he's like, oh, well, at the time I've supported England. I suppose the implication being that maybe his allegiance changed over time. But that's, from an Irish perspective, do you support your neighbours at a time when virtually all football fans in this country probably supported an English football team and didn't see any contradiction in that, and then cheering on Argentina, who fought the Falklands War with England and basically are a million miles away from Ireland? Yeah, we were supporting Argentina, but watching that game back, what I do remember at the time was just the actual pity I had for the Argentinian defenders in trying to do anything with Michael Owen one-on-one. And looking back now, he looks like a child, how young he was at that time. And as Dan said, just didn't kick on. Like his career was just ruined by injury. But the pace that he had, Michael Owen without pace was a fairly average player. At that time, his pace was so good and he had so much belief. It was frightening to think what he could become. But I was also supporting Argentina.
But you remember the best thing about that Argentina was Ayala was defending so deep. Ayala, he was defending so deep. It was almost like, if you were playing a game on your PlayStation, you accidentally plugged out the joypad and it was stuck. And it looked like Ayala was just stuck at the edge of his area for the entire thing. Because later in the tournament he was doing it, but Owen just sort of skipped past him. But it is I know what Johnny's saying. Without his pace, he was an average player, and obviously, he became that, and would say it himself. But even the quality of his finishing, even against Romania, I think earlier on, I think he was just in the zone, and I think he sort of said it himself that he probably wasn't even thinking too much about what he was doing. He just thought that this was a God-given gift almost that he had. and he didn't have to think. Didn't have to think about anything he did. It just happened. You know,
there was an innocence about it, Dan, wasn't there? Because you can imagine his worldview back then. It's 1998 compared to his worldview now, and probably just, you know, playing with these players he idolised, but basically looking at Ayala and looking at that Argentinian defence, the little nipper that he was, and thinking, like, you have absolutely no chance against me. And I wonder what Owen's reflections are. I know he was on off the ball. I wonder, watching back that game must have very mixed emotions for him, because obviously those powers aren't there anymore and his career wasn't what it could have been.
We got a few texts in here on 53106. Is a really funny one here. Afternoon, man. I was in the Gaeltacht for 1998. I distinctly remember watching the England-Argentina game in our Ballantyne's house with one of the teachers, and there was not one bit of Irish spoken during the penalties. Good times from Dave and Marino. Lads, I left my junior cert science exam after an hour to make sure I caught all of the Italy-Chile game, as I was a massive Roberto Baggio fan. My moment of the tournament was Baggio stepping up to take the penalty to level the match. It took a lot more nerve, especially after his 94 penalty miss. What a player. That's from Aidan. Hi, lads. My memory of 98 France winning without a decent striker. Henry still a winger and then a sub. I reckon either Guivarch or Dugarry played up front. You're right. I think neither scored in the tournament. Dugarry did, Guivarch didn't. An unusual feat. That's from John Waterford. We'll speak about Brazil and France later on in the hour. But guys, for me, the moment of the tournament was not in the final or the semi-final. It was in the quarter-final. It was this description of Dennis Bergkamp's goal.
Nederland gaat in de halve finale komen. Ik heb opeens zo'n gevoel dat we in de halve finale gaan komen met het balbezit voor Frank de Boer. Frank de Boer speelt de bal heel goed naar Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp neemt de bal aan. Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp! Oh! Frank de Boer speelt de bal naar Dennis Bergkamp. Die neemt de bal feilloos aan. En hij schiet de bal erin. We spelen nog officieel 20 seconden. Dennis Bergkamp! 2-1!
Lads, that is football.
That moment. We spoke about Tardelli last week, where you're lost in the emotion of a celebration because of something you've done. Tardelli wouldn't have scored as many goals as Bergkamp, whatever. Bergkamp's reaction to that goal, the pass, and then the reaction to what he'd just done, the absolute disbelief, and the fact that Bergkamp is like a guy with a fear of flying. He's a very shy individual. He has his own kind of human traits like the rest of us. If you meet him, he's not a remarkable individual. He's not going to tell you, like, oh, I was an amazing football player. He's very down to earth. But the goals he could score, and for me, that's one of the all-time best goal scorer moments. Not only was it in the 90th minute, but to take place in Marseille as well, like pretty much the home of football in France. Unforgettable stuff.
Yeah, it really was an incredible goal. Well, I had forgotten that Ortega had got himself sent off before it. That, you know, for the headbutt on Van der Sar, you know, Ortega's one of these Argentine playmakers that, like, they always tried to have someone as the next Maradona. You know, they had various sort of incarnations of it, and he had this sort of the size and the build and the number 10, and like he had these moments of brilliance. But obviously, he had the self-destruct overcame the brilliance in that. But the Bergkamp goal, you played the clip there. I got a lot of comments earlier on, John, about the Barry Davies commentary on that as well. People saying it was just an amazing piece of commentary that he produced. But that was just an awesome. I remember Bergkamp scoring a great goal for Arsenal against Leicester. Do you remember that in a Premier League game at some point? And it was late enough in the game as well. But that moment, from basically a sort of a hopeful punt forward in the sun, I like that.
That's a bit harsh, Dan. It was a better pass than that.
Well, it was an angled ball. It was a very angled ball, I guess. But he still, I mean, you wouldn't be talking about that pass 22 years later if it wasn't for the control. I mean, the fact he plucked it out of the air, like that's what made it so good. You know, I'm sure several similar passes were tried in the same game, but that was just, I mean, that was absolute top notch. And again, around the time where, like, the stars were starting to come to the Premier League too. I mean, this was another thing about this tournament. We spoke about 82 last week, and we spoke about, you know, 82 and how, like, for people at the time, they were almost learning about some of these players for the first time. I guess 98 was at the crossroads, or maybe beyond the crossroads, of when all of a sudden the Premier League became the magnet for some of these stars. Because if you remember, like, after 94, some of the Romanian players were signed, like Dumitrescu, and some of the World Cup stars were going there, but it was almost still Italy was the place to be, and England was picking up the veterans like Klinsmann and people who were getting to a later stage of their career. But by the time sort of 98 came round, you were starting to get people. Well, Bergkamp obviously had come under Bruce Rioch, he'd been there for a while, but you were suddenly starting to see some stars from this tournament. Like, I got a few comments earlier about Mustafa Hadji, who, one of the Morocco stars, who was signed by Coventry, because Coventry obviously had the means around that time to go sign on World Cup players. And this was when the Premier League was starting to take off. And all of a sudden, some of these players, they weren't as new and as mysterious as they might have been in previous tournaments, because you were probably seeing them on Match of the Day and week to week, as opposed to maybe just every 2 or 4 years.
We're speaking about France 1998 and the memories of that great tournament that France won. A lot of tweets at Off the Ball on text on 53106 from our listeners and our tweeters today. Ian Ryan, I was 12. We were on holidays in France. We watched the final in a bar. When France won, my cousin and I ended up on the roof of a car with a France flag doing laps of the town. The atmosphere was electric. I hope you were safe, Ian. Gavin Keenan was landscaping in Philadelphia on a J1. Rain cancelled work, so watched France beat Croatia in a local bar. Thuram scoring twice. Larry White, as in Laurent Blanc, sent off. Supped pints all afternoon. Julian Salmon, remember watching the Nigeria-Spain game, the B&B, run by one of my mates in Dublin, full of recent Nigerian arrivals into the country. Wasn't a Spain fan for long that day. What a great bunch of people to watch a match with. Infectious enthusiasm. Will Clark met Maradona in Pacha in Ibiza on the night of the final, and then met Yuri Djorkaeff 2 days after he won the World Cup in Space. I don't know, is Space another nightclub? I'd hope it is.
Yeah, that's Will Clark, and now is a very prominent schoolboy football coach in Dublin now, John. So I'm not sure if he's setting like an example to his players of like, I don't know how old Will was at the time. I'm guessing he was in a teenage territory himself, but he was, because I think he had a follow-up about shouting over to Diego about Maradona, shouting to Maradona while one of his mates was balancing points on his head, and Maradona sent him over some champagne. So
it just sounds so believable at the same time.
Yeah, well, we're all on a bit of a Maradona binge now with, the movie being on last week and so on. But I did not realise now that Will had partied with them in Ibiza around that time. It is something to tell his players whenever they get back out there,
Okay, 53106, your text. We'll talk about Brazil and France with Neil Treacy, Daniel McDonnell and Johnny Ward after this. Loving this chat here about World Cup 1998 on Off the Ball. And just one before we go to the break, racing home from watching the Tour de France in Hollywood, County Wicklow, to watch the final that night. Back after this.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
On Alive and Kicking this weekend, Dermot Whelan on the power of meditation in stressful times, performance nutritionist Daniel Davey on keeping fitness and nutrition in check, and Irish surrogate Becky Loftus on helping her struggling to conceive friends become parents.
Alive and Kicking with Claire McKenna.
Thanks to ntc.ie.
This Sunday from 9 a.m.
on News Talk.
When you sign family members up with Vodafone Red Family, our multi-mobile package, you're guaranteed a third plan completely free. However, we're afraid you're not guaranteed that family snaps will come out perfectly.
Say cheese!
Or that the jokes in the family group chat will improve. But for a guaranteed third mobile plan absolutely free, pop in store to get Vodafone Red Family for your whole family. Well, except the dog. Free plan offer based on adding Red Plus as a third account. Contract depends on package chosen. Offer ends March 30th, 2020. See Vodafone.ie for full terms.
What's yellow and blue and got room for you? You Store It. You Store It is Ireland's best and most trusted self-storage provider.
I used You Store It when moving house, and having the flexibility of access when I needed it certainly helped with the stress of moving.
Visit our website, check out our 5-star reviews and book today for home or business storage. What's yellow and blue and got room for you? You Store It. Visit youstorit.ie.
Switch to SSE Electricity and get an incredible 26% off your home electricity. Switch today and join the thousands of Irish homes and businesses sourcing their power from 100% green energy. Get your 26% discount today. Free phone 1800 818 466. This is a great deal. This is Generation Green. EAB €879.22. Offer from 20th November 2019. Rates valid from 3rd of December 2018, subject to change. 1 year standard unit rate discount for new home electricity customers on direct debit and e-bill. For details of T's and C's, EAB, exit fees, standing charges, see sscelectricity.com.
This is an important safety message from Dunnes Stores. To keep our customers and colleagues safe, we ask that where possible you go alone to your nearest Dunnes Stores. Avoid rush hour and spend as little time as possible in the shop. Stay the recommended distance of 2 metres away from others and be patient in queues. If you were shopping on behalf of others and need help, please ask. Please protect and respect store teams who continue to provide an important service. Use contactless payment where possible. Thanks for your understanding. Dunn Stores, always there for our customers.
Hello, you're through to the Women's Aid Helpline.
Thanks to your continued support and our staff and volunteers, the Women's Aid National Free Phone Helpline continues to provide free and confidential support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call 1800 341 900 or online chat at womensaid.ie. Women's Aid. Listening, believing, supporting.
As a nation, we've been asked to come together by staying apart. At An Post, we're doing everything we can to help you through these unprecedented times. Post offices are remaining open and deliveries and collections are continuing to operate. Our staff are working tirelessly to maintain services and connect communities all across Ireland. We've introduced special measures to ensure the health and safety of our customers and staff. Together, we can do our part and help each other and our communities. For details, see onpost.com. On Post, for your world.
COVID-19 is a major public health emergency here in Ireland and around the world. It's having a big impact on the way we live our lives, how we stay connected as communities, and how we use open spaces. If you are planning on heading out into the fresh air, here are 5 things to remember. 1. Stay local, within 2 kilometres of home. 2. Keep a distance of 2 metres from others. 3. Go out with members of your own household only. 4. Always enjoy the outdoors with consideration and respect for the people you meet along the way. And 5. Wash your hands before you leave home, and always observe coughing and sneezing etiquette. Find out more at gov.ie. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
In these uncertain times, we discover the best in each other and in our communities. Your local community pharmacy is working hard in difficult circumstances to supply the medicines you need and the advice you trust. We are asking people to be understanding of small delays and, if possible, phone ahead to make arrangements for collecting your prescription. Your local community pharmacy, always here for you. Brought to you by the Irish Pharmacy Union.
At Irish Life Health, we believe everyone needs a healthy mind as well as a healthy body to embrace life's changes. That's why all our hospital plans offer independent professional counselling. Talk to us about health insurance today. We know Irish Life. We are Irish Life Health. Service provided by LifeWorks by Moore & O'Chappell. Available to age 16 plus and where clinically appropriate. Irish Life Health Act is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Terms and conditions apply.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
Off the Ball.
By now, you've no doubt made the first scribblings on your wall chart as the 16th World Cup got underway in Paris this afternoon.
Early ball from Rivaldo, and here's Ronaldo! Whoa, goodness me!
Wait a minute, he's taking another card out for Beckham. It's a red card for David Beckham.
He did retaliate. If you look, he has a little flick at him and then he kicks him.
Beg your pardon, 2 idols around here. You're one and Martin O'Neill is the other.
Thanks, Des. To be fair, you've done really well because I thought you would struggle after take that. I did honestly.
Dennis Bergkamp, net de bal aan! Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp! Dennis Bergkamp!
I'm just going to interrupt you there because news has just come out that the biggest wind-up in World Cup football history has just hit the news because Ronaldo will play.
Et but Zidane! Le Zidane! Je vous avais dit, il y avait le corner qui venait, il y a eu 2 corners.
Nous sommes, ils sont, tous ensemble, la France entière est championne du monde de football. Historique, inimaginable, 3-0.
You're very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. Memories of World Cup 1998, won by France in their host country. A great montage there by Richie McCormack. Thanks for that. We're joined today by Neil Treacy of Off the Ball, Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent, and the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward. Remember, our football coverage brought to you with thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. Just some of your text in here on 53106 about 1998. David Sexton, this is a tweet actually. I went to the Big Day Out Festival in Galway the day before the final. Beastie Boys and a host of others stayed in Galway the next night to watch the World Cup final. Loads of French in Galway that weekend for whatever reason, all the week before my 18th birthday. Great times. Thanks for that, David. Justin Mason, après match that year, getting a half day from work to watch the first game, watching France beat Paraguay with the golden goal just after Rovers had played Alti Spor from Turkey in the Intertoto Cup. A great memory of watching the England-Argentina game at a bar at Druids Glen on the preamble of the Irish Open when Sam Tarrant settled down in the seat next to me and we chatted throughout. He left with a wry smile. That is from Killian in Riverstick. And the founder of the Argentinian Navy was Admiral William Brown from Foxford in County Mayo, and there's a significant community of Irish heritage in Argentina. Nevertheless, it is silly that some Irish people support any team that is playing against England. That is from Martin in Blackrock in County Dublin. Neil, when I watched the movie, the official Sean Bean narrated movie of France 1998, there were two things that I kind of remembered. First of all, it was the golden goal for the first time in the World Cup, and also that Croatia reached the semi-finals in their first appearance.
Yeah, and Croatia they kind of came from. I actually remember I was in Germany when they beat Germany in the quarterfinals, and like I barely knew who Croatia were, if you know what I mean. I didn't know their history as far as Yugoslavia and things like that as well. But the great players like Davor Suker and stuff like that, and to me it probably seemed like a flash in the pan. Who were these guys? Obviously they'd been at Euro 96 and stuff, and since then they've gone on and they've reached a World Cup final as well. One thing I noticed with Croatia as well, watching the movie back, Zvonimir Boban dyeing his squad number into the back of his head. He had the number 10 dyed in red paint into the back, or red ink into the back of his head. That was one thing that jumped out for me. But yeah, they were fantastic. And I remember watching the semi-final between themselves and France over in Germany as well. What we were doing at the time, myself, my brother and my uncle, we were all throwing, I think it was like 1 or 2 Deutschmarks into a little pot, and we were predicting the scores and things like that for the games that were on in the evening. And this is going to sound made up. I called it that night, Croatia to take the lead and France to come back and win 2-1, and Lilian Thuram was going to get one of the goals.
I think this is after time and even beyond after time. I feel all after time. Just don't believe you, Neil.
That is, I 100% guarantee you it's true. I know I have no way of actually proving it, but I did predict that. I won about like 4 Deutschmarks off it in the end, though. Unfortunately,
if you still have the Deutschmarks, but like the thing, like I mean, there's 2 ways of looking at that. I mean, that's both brilliant, but also your career had basically peaked at the age of, like, you know,
look at you now,
6 or 8. Like that was your best ever prediction. Like from there, like it's downhill completely. But like Croatia hammering Germany as well, though. Like
that was a filthy game. It was a filthy game as well.
Yeah, I remember they'd beaten them, but not that they'd absolutely hammered them. And of course, this was like Germany were having won 96. They were sort of lurching towards an even more disastrous Euro 2000, which sort of spawned their footballing revolution and eventually brought them back to the top of the world, like 14 years later. But this was on the way down. This obviously accelerated their push. We got Croatia, of course, in our next group then for Euro 2000, and Ireland beat Croatia that September in Dublin, in Lansdowne Road, because Ireland got a really tough group and actually started it off really well because this whole theory of the World Cup or the major tournament hangover, and Croatia had one.
I remember actually being at that game you mentioned, Dan. I think did Keane get a penalty? We won 2-0, I think. Very, very
Keane
comfortable win.
Irwin got a penalty, I think. I think it was Keane and Irwin.
Keane got the other one.
Keane got the other one, and I remember, like, it would have been very rare for me to be at a game in Lansdowne Road in those days, and it was a magic thing. But first of all, John, I want to laud you on Kelly Watch the Stars, the Air Classic there.
It's Richie McCormick now, not me.
Yeah. And Cormac, and then Admiral William Brown. I know that song. There's a song that honours him. The Wolf Tones would have played it. But funny. One of the things about this tournament, right? And this did come back. Do you remember the game between Iran and the US?
Yeah.
Yes.
World Peace Day.
Yeah. So that was like, obviously that I've been there a couple of times to Iran, and the old American embassy, which was the main site of Argo, the movie and all that. That was turned into basically a place for the Revolutionary Guards, and there's massive like anti-American graffiti outside it, and there is a real, once you go to Iran, like as much as they've no problem whatsoever with American people, they have a massive issue with the American government, and that exists to this day. But I was texting a guy from Iran this morning. He was like, you cannot imagine what it was like. He was saying the leader and the presidents all were issuing messages of congratulation, people dancing on the streets, a week of celebrations across the country. It was even the situation where other Muslims in the Middle East from like rival countries were happy and waving the Iranian flag, and it was considered a massive political victory by the politicians at that time. You can just imagine, you know, a suppressed country, and obviously we were to meet them in a playoff as well.
But like, that was a dead rubber as well, though, wasn't that one of the things?
It was.
Like, you'd like to think when all the people were on the streets, there was like an Iranian Roy Keane in the TV studio, absolutely kicking off that all these people are out for a sing-song, you know, because they've won this dead rubber match.
That was a pretty interesting group. Actually, looking back at it though, when I was looking at it last night, Germany, Yugoslavia, USA, and Iran.
Yeah,
interesting is the word I'll put to it. Like.
To various degrees.
53106 for your text one in here. My memory of France 98 was watching the final in Thurles after the famous Clare-Waterford-Munster hurling final replay, which sparked the Colin Lynch affair. That's from Michael and Claire. Lads, back then, do you remember Ronaldo as being so sensational as a World Player of the Year twice before the World Cup? You had that Nike ad. Yeah, Ronaldo like bursting through the tournament, really impressive against the Dutch in the semi-final, and then it all went wrong in the final. You can never forget the John Motson, Trevor Brooking, completely incredulous Motson, and that Ronaldo wasn't on the team sheet. In your minds, guys, I know Brazil were conceding a lot of goals, conceded 2 to Denmark, lost to Norway. In your minds, were Brazil just going to turn up and win that final?
Yes. I think so, yeah. I mean, Ronaldo was sensational. I'm trying to think, actually, was it the year before they had Le Tournoi, where Roberto Carlos scored that unbelievable free kick? And he tried to mimic it throughout the tournament. But Ronaldo, yeah, like he was unplayable. Like he was almost like from a different world. And I even remember one of the computer games around that time, you'd always want Ronaldo because he always seemed to have this, like was it FIFA or one of these, where he had this amazing speed and acceleration. And even like watching the film back today, he seemed to score the same goal a lot of times, or the same run where he was sort of spinning off the defenders, and that's it. Like he was gone. He was always just onside. Well, he was incredible. And yeah, because I seem to recall that the French team still, like, I mean, a bit like the Euros the last time round, they'd had a generous enough run to the final. Like they hadn't necessarily, they'd beaten Italy, okay, but beyond that, they'd probably, you know, even Croatia was deemed a weaker enough opponent to get. And there was a feeling, well, they've had a luckier run, whereas Brazil had beaten Chile and beaten Holland, and this was their moment. And the final, it wasn't that it was going to be a formality because France had a good defence, but it was, you assumed it was all going to be Brazil attack versus France defence. That's my recollection of it anyway, just like Ronaldo being this otherworldly talent. And I kind of wonder if someone who's 4 or 5 or 6 years younger, you know, who remembers Ronaldo in maybe completely different terms and almost a punchline, without necessarily remembering this sensational player that he was.
Well, he was il fenomeno. He was the World Player of the Year twice before that, and he was incredible. And I think, to be fair, it was shown by the 2002 performance when he came back after that trauma of '98, and I think we scored 8 goals in the finals, including 2 in the final against the Germans. I just think it must have completely thrown Brazil off kilter. And France, whatever people want to say about them, and I get your point, Dan, and I kind of agree with it, that they did have a nice run through, and the Italy game was quite a dull match, and it was quite a cagey match at the Stade de France, that they scored 15 goals and they only conceded 2 throughout their whole tournament. And with the defence and the midfield they didn't have a striker. It's funny, like Thierry Henry scored the most goals for France in the tournament, but didn't get to play in the final. Stéphane Guivarc'h, who was a good player in the French league, did, but was seen as a flop. But they didn't need him because Zidane was there scoring 2 headers in the final, and also they had such great players like Desailly, who did get sent off in the final. They Blanc, who didn't make the final, and Slaven Bilic was a real villain in that semi-final, going down when he wasn't even touched. But they had a great team. And it's funny you mentioned the Premier League earlier. Emmanuel Petit had spent a season at Arsenal, and then that kind of, I think, propelled us into that age, as you say, with Overmars and Arsenal, with Henry really becoming a huge player in the Premier League. And it was those kind of players that made the Premier League over the next 10 years rather than English players.
Yeah, and in fairness to France as well, they were so solid at the back that time. Thuram, I seem to recall, was right back. And essentially, you can probably win a World Cup without having a proper strike force, and that's what they did, because you can get your way through the group stages pretty comfortably, and then if you don't concede goals, you can win 1-0, stuff like that. And I do remember Zidane, he wasn't unbelievable in the tournament itself, and I think the Brazilian team were probably beaten with the Ronaldo situation. It may be a bit like Argentina in '94 when the whole Maradona thing happened. They were probably a busted flush after that, and I think their general confidence, and also the fact that famous and never to be forgotten and much debated story about Ronaldo's readiness for the final and what was going on behind in the background there. That would have, you can't go into a final where you're relying on small margins, where you're mentally completely thrown out of the way. But I think if Ronaldo had been fit, France wouldn't have won that game.
Can you imagine how that Ronaldo thing would have played itself out on Twitter?
Oh my
Bloody
God!
hell.
Yeah,
it would have been absolute carnage. People were racing to get their team sheet out, and and there's already enough conspiracy theories about what happened then, but you can only sort of imagine now. You probably have Trump tweeting about them. It was sort of an extraordinary world event. And I know, the accepted version now is that he did have some kind of seizure or convulsion earlier in the day. But even now, you will have people contesting and disputing, the various versions of that. But even that it could happen that Brazil didn't emerge for their warm-up. You just think about it. It was just something that I don't ever think is. I know you said he came back in 2002, but I still don't think he was viewed in the same way then, John.
He was, no.
Maybe it was a sort of it was like a redemption story, but he was pre that final in '98, he didn't need redemption. He was superhuman. So you didn't think he could ever be like Tiger Woods coming back to win the Masters or something. It's not. This was like the invincible phase where you thought nothing could happen to him, and that it did in such a dramatic way. It's unthinkable.
Yeah,
it's.
Sorry, you go ahead, John.
Yeah, it's probably that they'd more rounded team. In 2002, they had the three: they had Ronaldo, they had Rivaldo, and Ronaldinho. Whereas back then, I think it was just they were really, really, really powerful in that semi-final. They probably should have beaten Holland in normal time or in extra time with De Nielsen as well. But yeah, so I think, Neil, that it was just a case that it completely threw them. I read Brian Glanville's chapter on it in the official story of the World Cup, or he is effectively seen as the doyen of football writers. It was a convulsion. It was just a very, very strange thing that happened, and it just opened the door, I think, for France in front of their home fans. Remember, and one of the beautiful things about France, I remember that year and watching the film about it, the amount of face paint people had on. I don't know if people wear as much face paint when they go to football matches these days. Was just the kind of the blend of race, from different from white, from black, and that it was a real unifying force for France, a bit like for their country in '98.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Dan, on Ronaldo, when you were mentioned there, that it's always the one that you still talk about when you think of Ronaldo. When you think of him, you don't necessarily think of the 2002 World Cup winner. You still automatically, your mind just drifts to '98 because that was the one where he was front and center of the entire tournament. He was the face of Nike worldwide.
Yeah, he was everywhere. The ad. I mean, his girlfriend was front and center and in the crowd.
Every single game. Every game, yeah.
Are they still together? Does anyone know?
She ended up married.
Julio Cesar, isn't it?
She married the goalkeeper. So this was another one of the theories that was out there, was that he was upset over something. We're not going down the conspiracy Jim Core route here, but he definitely. I don't think he ever. He was never viewed in the same way as you said, arising from that. But John is right as well, though. That it was a glorious moment for France, who you remember hadn't even qualified for the previous couple of tournaments. But also as well, there's a sort of a poignancy about it now as well, because there was that unity, as John mentions, and this was Zidane and the other players, Christian Carambo and other players who were all from sort of various immigrant communities, or they were, and it was almost viewed as, well, this is a new France, and that division isn't there. But of course, that division was coming. It came back. you know, and in the years that followed, France lost that moment. And, you know, I mean, obviously the world even was a very different place in 1998 relative to, you know, sort of 9/11 3 years later, and almost this, you know, what followed was, you know, the terror attacks and a completely different atmosphere. And it was something we heard about a lot during the Euros in 2016, that there was a hope that maybe that could be a unifying force, because the French football team, having stood for unity, suddenly became almost a magnet for other differences that existed in society. There was that Laurent Blanc incident as well, where he was obviously speaking about quotas for players, and I think it was a recording of stuff he may or may not have said. And there was, between that 98 team, then there was almost division between Thuram on one side and you know, some of the other players on the other. And so that France team, as a moment in time, again, it was glorious, but actually they were maybe torn apart and pulled apart by the decade or so to follow.
Well, interesting. I actually think that France's team in 2000 was a better team, and they then had Trezeguet and Henry as actual frontline players, and then they won the Euros. And it's funny that I wonder in the next Euros next year, will you have an even better France team? And another thing, Deschamps lifted the trophy, and then he managed them to win the World Cup 20 years later.
Deschamps was also the oldest looking professional footballer I think I've ever seen in 1998. Like he looked about 50.
We did, to be fair,
It's like all the lads, but like, did you ever see one of the Panini sticker albums from the late 80s?
Yeah.
Like, they all look around 45. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, all the players look like they should have been in Brookside, you know? So, like,
that's the funny thing, though, Dan. Like, Michael Owen honestly looks about 14.
Yeah, no, it is true. Like, I mean, again, like, even a young Henry, John watched the film as I did. You would have seen John. It was a celebration from Henry after one of the early goals, and he has the bit of the swagger, all right, but it's still a younger Henry, you know, compared to, you know, the presence that, well, he became known as something else in Ireland around 11 years later. Let's not go there.
Yeah, we got tweets in here from Joseph Conroy. Remember being 9 and loving that Dutch team, and also tweets about saw Ronaldo score 2 identical goals for Inter against Roma. Same role off the last defender, and blinding pace and power. 2 tasty finishes. Brilliant player who's had an unfair legacy perception. That's from Derek Carroll. Don't forget the god-awful cheat Bilic. His conduct in the semi-final was despicable. Doesn't look good on the replay. The right back for Iran was a really good player, a bit like Cosmin Contra for Romania. The Nike commercial featuring the Brazilians for that World Cup was really good. These are on 53106. And Les Bleus, a great documentary on Netflix about the France 98 team and social and political impact afterwards. That is from Maria. Yeah, Amy Jacquet then as well was a much maligned French coach and got a lot of criticism at the time. But we'll discuss this, I think, a little bit more after the break, and also a lot of other football stories are going on during the week. We've got John Giles' best 11 of the Liverpool team of all time. We'll get into the kind of the weeds of that and discuss if anybody who has a different view on John, and obviously the impact on the coronavirus pandemic on football and on industry as we discuss this on Off the Ball Saturday here. So 53106 for your text. We'll also read some of the sports books that you've been giving us recommendations for. We had a great panel earlier on with Ward and Neil Treacy, Arthur O'D and myself, discussing your favourite sports book and your recommendations for sports books, and lots to get through. You can also check it out on offtheball.com later on our podcast network and on YouTube. So 53106 for your text. Back after this on Off the Ball Saturday.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
Join that conversation on Facebook and Twitter.
COVID-19 is a major public health emergency here in Ireland and around the world. It's having a big impact on the way we live our lives, how we stay connected as communities, and how we use open spaces. If you are planning on heading out into the fresh air, here are 5 things to remember. 1. Stay local, within 2 kilometres of home. 2. Keep a distance of 2 metres from others. 3. Go out with members of your own household only. 4. Always enjoy the outdoors with consideration and respect for the people you meet along the way. And 5. Wash your hands before you leave home, and always observe coughing and sneezing etiquette. Find out more at gov.ie. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
I trust my kids. I trust my instinct. I trust my doctor to look after me. I trust my pharmacist to give me the best advice. I trust my pharmacist when they recommend a generic medicine from Clonmel Healthcare. I trust they're more affordable. And because Clonmel Healthcare has looked after Irish families for 40 years, I trust they'll look after me too. Ask for a generic medicine from Clonmel Healthcare, looking after you and yours since 1970.
TechFinder gives your business access to thousands of IT contractors globally on one direct platform. Browse thousands of professional profiles. Create job postings. With a no-commission policy, TechFinder's subscription platform does the work for you. Join now as a company or contractor at techfinder.com.
At your local Centra, our communities matter. We're near, we're receiving stock regularly, and we're here to help. If you're shopping for yourself or someone more vulnerable, you can rely on Centra. Be safe, be kind, and let's look after each other. Because when it comes to community, we're in this together. Centra.
Need to get rid of some junk? Clear out the shed or the attic? Or maybe tackle that overgrown garden? Why not pick up a big yellow A1 skip bag from your local Circle K store? With a 10% discount on collections, it's great value. Remember, A1 skip bags are available from your Circle K Dublin, Cork, Waterford and Limerick, except Circle K Express. See a1skipbags.ie.
In these difficult times, the tourism industry is facing extraordinary challenges. And at Fáilte Ireland, we're doing everything we can to help. That's why we've created a dedicated online support hub to guide and advise over the coming weeks and months. Visit fáilteireland.ie for regular official updates on everything from accessing finance to tourism business supports. And know that in this, the most challenging of times, we're here to support you.
Charities play a crucial role in Irish communities, particularly in times of crisis. If you have been moved to donate your time or money to a charitable cause, make sure you are giving with your head as well as your heart. Always check the Register of Charities to ensure you are giving to a registered charity. You can check the register at www.charitiesregulator.ie. A message from the Charities Regulator.
Do you know that auctioneers, estate agents, letting agents and property management agents must be licensed by the Property Services Regulatory Authority? An auctioneer may auction land, fine arts, antiques, cars or animals at a mart. When engaging your agent, don't assume your agent is licensed. Check the Register of Licensees at psr.ie. Report unlicensed operators to the PSRA. Remember, no PSRA licence, no consumer protection.
In this week's Sunday Times, our reporters in Ireland, the UK and around the world bring you the latest on the pandemic sweeping the globe. Make sure you never miss an edition by taking our 7-day digital package for just €5 a month, with the first month free. Subscribe today at thetimes.ie/join.
For everyone's sake, we're all being asked not to socially gather. So while you can't visit your local restaurant or takeaway, Just Eat will happily deliver all your favourite dishes to the safety of your home. Simply download the Just Eat app, search your local area for restaurants delivering to you, and place your order. You can pay by card and leave a note to request contactless delivery. Just Eat. We're delivering.
On 106 to 108 FM, on newstalk.com, on smart speaker, and on the Newstalk app. This is Newstalk.
It's 4 o'clock. Good afternoon. The government is due to publish a list of what are considered essential workers later this evening. It follows new restrictions ordering people to stay at home. The exceptions are to buy food, attend medical appointments, exercise within 2 kilometres of your home, or for vital family reasons. Travel for essential work is allowed, but all social gatherings are banned. Speaking earlier, Health Minister Simon Harris said the essential worker category does not include construction workers.
Unless they're building something that is essential to this pandemic. So, for example, if we were to decide that we needed to put in modular units or adapt a hotel, or you can imagine things that we need to do to actually get through this pandemic, of course, that would be essential. But in general, the message is really simple here. I need everybody in Ireland to stay at home.
Well, it's feared 150,000 people could be out of a job today if the majority of building sites close. Tom Parlin from the Construction Industry Federation says they'll continue to follow the advice of public health officials.
If a site couldn't comply with the regulations, they would close. And that was the situation. On the other hand, 150,000 people are going to be made redundant today, temporary layoffs or whatever. That's going to add very substantially to the difficulty and the other 100,000 plus people that are there. We've followed the directive by the Chief Medical Officer all of the time, and we continue to do that now.
Well, Irish Rail says it'll continue to provide services during the pandemic, but a reduced timetable will operate from Monday. In line with government restrictions, the company is asking that only essential workers continue to use its trains. Irish Rail spokesperson Barry Kenny says customers also need to maintain a physical distance whilst travelling.
So we'd advise all customers to check their times before travel. We are ensuring that there's a consistent service throughout the day. So for those people who absolutely have to travel, and we're very much stressing that to customers, please only make a journey if you have to. It will ensure that we can maintain social distancing on board.
And finally this hour, the world's oldest man has had to cancel his 112th birthday celebrations tomorrow because of the coronavirus outbreak. Bob Waiton from Hampshire in England only took up the title of the oldest man in the world last month after the previous holder died. Mr. Waiton, who was born in Hull on the 29th of March 1908, was 10 years old during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, which killed between 50 and 100 million people. That's your news update. It's just gone 2 minutes past 4.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. Did you know that the AA does great value home insurance? Go to the AA.ie.
Cold and dry tonight with long clear spells, especially in the north of the country. Lowest temperatures between -2 and 0 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
And you're very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5 o'clock in the company of Daniel McDonnell from the Irish Independent and Johnny Ward, the broadcaster and journalist. Remember, our football coverage brought to you thanks to Paddy Power. For more information on responsible gambling, visit dunlewy.net. 53106 for your text. We're also streaming, so you can get in touch with us on the Off the Ball social channels, at Off the Ball on Twitter, on Facebook and on YouTube. And you can check out later on YouTube and on offtheball.com in the podcast network our discussion around France 1998. We're doing a series every week on the World Cup between 3 and 4. Watching the Amazon Prime video or wherever the video is, the official video of the World Cup, and then discussing it or remembering it and kind of getting the kind of funny stories and the great players that featured at these World Cups. So 53106 is the number for your texts. Just want to say well done on putting together a sports radio show in these times, loving the best ofs, the top fives and the look backs, etc. It actually makes for great listening. That's from Martin. Thanks so much, Martin. Between 1:30 and 2:30 today, we had the Saturday panel, which was dedicated to sports books with Owen Sheehan, with Neil Treacy and with Arthur O'Dea. So we had also the business debate of sport during the coronavirus pandemic with Kieran Medler and Kevin Moore. So we didn't get a chance earlier on to get into some of the texts on the books and the recommendations that our listeners have made to us. We'll read some of them out now. Hi guys, not a tennis fan, but Andre Agassi's autobiography is well written as anything I've ever read. I'm also a huge Feinstein fan. That's John Feinstein. Thanks for keeping the sports pilot light lit, lads. The Club by Christy O'Connor, one of the best sports books I've read. Really honest account of a year in the life of a County Clare senior hurling team. That is from Thomas in Sligo. Can't believe Clark Carlisle's autobiography hasn't got a mention. On the subject of only a game, I read it when it was just published, and I laugh now with the advent of Amazon and buying online. I ordered the book from a small ad in Shoot magazine. It took about 3 weeks to reach me. I was very inspired and taken by the book. It still stays with me all of these years later. The ultimate irony is that Dunphy saw me for Shamrock Rovers 5 years later. That's from Alex in Selbridge. A brilliant book called Pitch Invasion by Barbara Smith, all about Adidas versus Puma and the two Dassler brothers who set up the company. That is from Cahill and Limerick. John, you're wrong on rugby books. I didn't think there were that many great rugby books out there. Recommend a Tom English book, The Grudge in England versus Scotland 1990. The Grand Slam is superb. The book on 1970 Lions tours to South Africa. Sexton's bio, Ian McGeechan's The Lions, When the Going Gets Tough, and many, many more I could recommend. That's from Paul Quigley in Kilcullen. A season on the brink about legendary and controversial basketball coach Bobby Knight. You don't have to be a basketball fan to enjoy it. That's from John in Lusk. Daniel and Johnny, do you have one sports book you could recommend for us?
Well, we went through books a couple of weeks ago now, so I'm kind of struggling. I recommended the Garincha book at the time, which is excellent. And Yeah, like that was the one that sprung to mind, that it was sort of off the, beyond the obvious ones. I've always had a problem with that Agassi one, actually.
Why?
I do have it, and it's brilliant, brilliantly written, but it's so well written. It's one of the things I have about ghostwriting, and having had a bit of experience at it, that I always think that, like, the autobiography, if you're ghostwriting someone's autobiography, you want to read it and imagine the subject saying it. You want it to be their voice. You want it to be their thoughts, their realistic, their clear recollection, and almost imagine them sitting down on a TV show and talking about it very clearly in the same way. And I just thought, while it was so well written, it was almost, it was almost over the top sort of lionizing of the central character himself, Agassi. And it was some of the recollections, they sort of would gloss over some of his own indiscretions and almost portray him as some kind of character in like a novel, as though he was almost gripped by all of this and powerless to prevent some of the things that happened. And while it's a brilliant piece of literature, it's like a really well written book, actually, as an autobiography, something that made me think we're really knowing the real person here, I'm not sure. I always sort of don't like that being cited as a true sort of depiction of what a sports autobiography should be. I just thought it was overwritten in such a way that this is just the author has taken the license here and gone very far with it, and that's absolutely fine, but that wouldn't be my preference. I want to imagine that person saying that stuff, and I thought that the Agassi one was just over the top. That's
Johnny,
my personal opinion. I just don't do it.
Yeah, it is interesting with autobiographies, in that the ghostwriting of autobiographies is definitely interesting, because you do want to believe, at the very least, that you are reading the actual sports person rather than the guy who helped him ghostwrite, or the woman who helped him ghostwrite. But in any event, as I said, probably as Dan said, we spoke about this a few weeks ago, A Life Too Short, Tragedy of Robert Enke, was written by Ronald Reng it got the 2011 Sports Book of the Year, written about Robert Enke, the German goalkeeper who passed away, and that was by far the most profound book I've ever read, sport or otherwise. And as I said 2 weeks ago, I definitely would, strongly suggest anyone who would like to have some understanding of what Robert Enke was going through. I think it gives a brilliant indication of somebody who could kind of put on some sort of a mask while out on the pitch, but ultimately was absolutely dying inside. And it was an amazing piece of writing by Reng.
Yeah, and Reng has got another book about the Bundesliga, which I have upstairs. I must read it. I think it's about the second division Bundesliga in the 70s and 80s, which is an interesting read. Hi Men, good show. The Boys of Summer by Roger Kahn, a great read about the 1955 Brooklyn Dodgers baseball team. You don't need to follow baseball. Great writing, great story, and great characters. What more could you want? That's from Jim and Dunboyne. Hungry Hill by Pat Critchley, Leisha's Honey, hurling all-star. Yeah, that was 1985. And Living Legend, hurling, football, basketball, musician and bard, a man whose list of achievements as a player, coach and mentor is unrivaled, full of anecdotes in the club and county, a passionate Laois man, and still working his magic with Carlow YT and girls basketball in Port Laois. You should get him on Off the Ball. That's from Brian McElroy in Laois. Alan from Meath here. I suppose the unputdownable books that stand out for me revolve around autobiographies, which would include Roy Keane's first one, Kieran Donaghy, Jim McGuinness's books. They're the essence of what we look for in a book. Raw, open, honest, controversial, perhaps. I don't read a sports book for the happy ever after. I read it for the honesty. If we're doing bad and bland sports books now, I could give you a list of them. My favourite sports book is The Damn United about Brian Clough's 44 days as manager of Leeds before he was sacked. Extremely well written, as well as being engrossing, pacey and absorbing, even better than the movie. That's from Oliver and Bray, although that was a work of fiction. And Donal Cusack's book was unputdownable and got me through a rough time. It is a rough time for a lot of people out there. We hope you're keeping well and safe. And Vinnie Perth, the Dundalk manager, was speaking during the week about how everything is trying to go up in Dundalk at the moment with the way they're dealing with this unprecedented pandemic. And he joined Joe Malloy on Off the Ball. And this is after the news that the club will be able to continue paying the players' wages for the time being.
Yeah, I suppose, without stating the obvious, obviously the bigger community and the wider community is more important than football at this stage. So absolutely concerned about everybody and everything else around the world. But yeah, I suppose it was a strange one when you got confirmation that, you know, everything was sound in Dundalk, and you see other clubs having to announce the opposite as such, in terms of not being able to pay players. So it left you with a strange feeling, because I didn't want to be the one saying, "Oh, we're all right, Jack." And you know, there's people in our community who in Dundalk who have lost their jobs. I was in around Dundalk today, and people around there have lost jobs, and companies, big companies, have shut down and put people on temporary leave. So it almost feels like you should say nothing, but at the same time, it's important that clubs send out a message as well, and they let people know that, you know, there is positive news as such around League of Ireland. So it was important we got that message out there, but at the same time, I was very wary. I know I spoke to Neil Fenn, Cork's manager, just to wish him well and hope everything goes well for them people. So it was a strange feeling, actually. It wasn't one where you punch the air and say, "Yeah, we're all right and we've got our money and to hell with everyone else." It's far from that. So yeah, but there's no doubt it's good news for the league to see not just ourselves, other clubs have been able to withstand the next couple of months, 12 weeks, whatever it may be.
Was Dundalk very quiet this afternoon?
It was, yeah. It was very eerie, and like in around the ground. Normally our ground would be sort of, I wouldn't say open to the public, but very often we'd be training and people would come in and have a look, and bar sort of the -1 training session, we'd never have a real problem with that. You'd often see people, particularly in the grass area we use, it's near a public sort of walkway. People would often stop and chat to players if they were hanging around, or they'd walk into the ground at different stages and have a look, and we've never really been against that. But in the ground today, it was strange. The gates are locked after me. There's only 3 or 4 members of staff there just tidying up and putting stuff away, literally. And so it was very eerie, and it's a strange time. You know, the drive from where I live to Dundalk at 9 o'clock takes me 45, 50 minutes. Normally it takes me an hour and a half, so it just shows you the world is in, or the country is close to lockdown as can be.
Yeah, it's all very surreal. I didn't realise that actually about Dundalk training in normal times being effectively open to the community, which is a lovely thing.
Yeah, like it wouldn't be, you know, it wouldn't be an open training session. We've often had open training sessions, but we quite often have people just literally walking past who come in and say hello. We've had some wonderful experiences. We had, you know, people travel from different parts of the world and just turn up to get a picture outside the ground. You know, that's what people do. With a girl from Canada over, and her father originated from Dundalk, and maybe 40 years before that, 40, 50 years ago, he used to go to watch games. She came out for a photograph. I don't know, I won't take the credit for it. I don't know who spotted her outside, asked her what she was doing. She came into the ground and she met all the players and got a photographed, left in tears of joy. Like, so I suppose that's what football is all about. It's probably why we all miss football and sport, because there is that human element to it where it brings so many people together.
Good words from Vinnie Perth there, the Dundalk manager. Daniel, the government are going to get behind businesses to the extent of 70% wage support. We've seen with Sligo and Cork having difficulties paying their players. Dundalk will be able to. Is this going to be a lifeline, the 70% guarantee? Can the FAI get more money from UEFA in advance? What's the kind of landscape or the reading of where we are at the moment with the League of Ireland players that are under a little bit of pressure?
Yeah, I'm sort of cautiously optimistic that it won't be as damaging as you might think, with the sort of the caveat, I suppose, being that this is based on things returning in June as they hope, or maybe you could justify a small wait beyond that. But as you say, you know, once clubs, you know, as companies can ascertain they qualify for that scheme where they can get 70% of wages paid up to 38 grand per year. And also, I think the PRSI sort of contribution has been slashed as well. So for most clubs in the country, I mean, they wouldn't have too many players really earning a massive amount above that, aside from the top two, say Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers, and 1 or 2 players at other clubs. But as you heard there, or as we know, Dundalk's owners have the means to support them, and I think Shamrock Rovers are fine too. And so it's not as grave as it might have been, without at the same time it being something that you can be complacent about and saying they're immune from difficulty. But I do think that, and we've seen it across the water, and I think maybe some of the clubs that are going to feel real pressure from this are those those clubs in leagues who are really overstretching themselves as it is to pay their wages, but they're reliant on massive streams of income coming in to keep them going. And I'm saying, like, I saw the Aberdeen chairman in Scotland speaking about how they were expecting 5 million of revenue coming in. I see clubs in the Championship in England really looking to agree wage deferral packages, because like those clubs operate massive losses anyway, but they can get away with it because they do have like very high turnover, high income, and almost the sums break even doesn't really matter to them. I think Wolves a couple of years ago when they got promoted, they lost like 52 million that year in trading, but they're trying to chase that Premier League money. A lot of clubs in Championship and lower leagues are doing that, and all of a sudden if things stop or for a long period of time and TV revenue becomes an issue, and maybe, who knows, going into the future, maybe TV deals are going to be affected on account of this. People are pausing subscriptions, and while the very elite will be fine, I do sort of wonder if a lot of the second-tier clubs around the world are the ones who could be more vulnerable. So I do have a slight hope that in Ireland, presuming things can return soon enough, that scheme that you mentioned, I mean, they should qualify. I mean, they just have to prove that they're down 25% of their normal turnover. I think normal sort of trading, and that's pretty obvious for clubs who rely on gate receipts and so on, that they should qualify. So there seems to be. I certainly spoke to a lot of people on Tuesday, Wednesday when this scheme was announced, and there was a certain amount of relief, because if that package wasn't there, as you correctly point out in your question, I think like the FAI would have to be going to UEFA, or clubs going to the FAI for advance monies when the FAI aren't exactly flushed, and they may still need some kind of support, but nowhere near the level of support they might have imagined if that sort of wage subsidy scheme hadn't been created.
Yeah, it's funny that Johnny as well, that like Leeds agreed that deferral during the week, and Karen Brady's coming out today saying, the West Ham board member, that they're looking at July to hold matches. There's a lot of legal and ethical, I would say, issues now around getting sport back on track. Like West Ham players today being self-isolating because they're testing positive. And I think the prospect of making just the seasons null and void is not going to provoke as much rancor as it might have a few weeks ago, with the way this has moved so fast and so seriously.
I don't know though, John. I mean, with all due respect, you cannot declare the season null and void. Like, and I'm thinking 100% of Liverpool fans here. I mean, you just cannot do this to Liverpool fan. They've waited all this time. They've absolutely coasted to the league. They're going to get a record points tally. The league is over. You couldn't have a bet on them at 1,000 to 1 on that they're going to win the league. Surely not. I mean, I know I've read stories this week about clubs are worried about the ethical kind of optics of all of this, and football is clearly quite irrelevant. But people need to remember this virus is going to subside in a year or two's time. Life will have completely moved on. We'll be debating local derbies. All this will move on. I would 100% hope that there's like the situation in Ireland where we have an abridged season, where the normal winter leagues, that next season is going to be a shorter season or something like that. But from the English league's perspective, for me, it's totally out of the question that you wouldn't complete the seasons. If that's at the cost of subsequent seasons, fine. But you can't declare the Premier League this season null and void, because otherwise, I don't think Liverpool fans would ever want to watch football again.
Yeah, but Johnny, it's a tough one. You see, like I do basically agree with your sentiment, and I think anything that should be done to any aspiration to finish the season is, I think it's a noble one. It is the right thing to do. But you are getting to the stage now where they are voiding non-league, they're voiding ladders within women's football, and there comes a stage where there needs to be some kind of collective policy across the board. And okay, Liverpool are clear cut, so that makes it even more straightforward. But I mean, you know, you have relegation places and other positions, prize money. There's massive complications. I'm not saying you don't know what they are. Like, I think we all know what the complications are. But I just think that, like, you know, you say, well, let's just make next year shortened. But like, the Premier League relies on massive TV money, you know, generated by X amount of games, X amount of, you know, the season being this length or that length or whatever it might be. And yeah, in theory, say, you know, we should finish this season at the expense of subsequent seasons. That sounds fine in theory, but in practice, that could prove to be more complicated. Now, I'm not advocating voiding. I think that, as with all these things, there's going to be people with their club preference. I don't have any growl for any English club, so I have no stake in the game here. I think, like, it should, you know, they should attempt to endeavour to finish the season. But you do get to the stage where, if this goes on till September, the argument for starting another season again, like, it does become stronger. And yeah, a grievance would linger. But then again, like, relegation, like, you know, Leicester, you know, aren't in the Champions League, who having earned it. There's going to be hard luck stories. But
when you say going on to September, what do you mean there?
I mean that their next game of football that you can't play, say, in a winter league in England, is September. So do you say that you return and you play 9 games then you have to have a break of pre-season before, you know, you start your next season. Now, I mean, the point has been made, and I think we spoke about it here pretty early doors, like, you do have that Winter World Cup in 2022.
Yeah.
And you could there is an argument to be made.
That's the stupid Qatar World Cup.
Yeah, which is so stupid, but could end up being somewhat useful. But I just think, like, I know that, like, when someone calls for it to be voided, everyone's instantly jumping on them, going, "Well, this is typical. You know, you're engaged in some conspiracy against, you know, X, Y, or Z."
No. I don't think that's the case. I think this is a case about public health here, and that's at this stage. Now, this has moved so quickly. This is about public health and a very unprecedented world pandemic.
I agree with you, John.
But
therefore, that has to be the priority here.
John, there are 29 games gone in the season. It's not like there are 12 games gone.
I know that, but I think that it's just a case of we just don't know. And at the moment when we just don't know, like, if it did become null and void for the fact that they just couldn't play it, it would just have to be the case.
They're going to have to change all the and FIFA. FIFA. I don't envy FIFA. In fact, I don't envy any decision maker on this, because it's really difficult. Like, it is, and like, people are going to lose their minds probably over aspects of this, and yet they shouldn't, because as you're right, John, it's a public health, you know, emergency, and everything is secondary to that. But, you know, if sport is a distraction for people, and they need a distraction, and, you know, that's always going to be the way that it functions. I don't envy them, because, like, you have contracts that are up, you know, in June the 30th. They're looking at, you know, force majeure to extend those contracts. But, you know, there's people could take legal cases here based on if they wanted to be particularly strong about it. Like, if you know, if you're a club that gets relegated, you know, for a season that resumes 6 months afterwards, and you're affected by some circumstances or events, I can just see it getting messy in every scenario. And I know we always refer to Liverpool because they're the team that are way clear and on their way to the title. But really, it's actually much more important, because Liverpool are going to be grand financially either way. It's just a bit of glory. It's the clubs that are on the precipice of promotion and relegation, and, you know, all of that entails, and that also involves people's jobs and livelihoods. They're the ones that are, that their situation is even more so pressing, you know, and we've seen that in England now, where they were looking at stopping ladders 5 and 6, which is like the conference and the level below. But, you know, there's a team, I think Barrow, who are on their way to getting promoted to the Football League for the first time since 1972. And if it stops, what happens to them? And for them, like, the cost of not making it would be far greater than it would for Liverpool.
You're getting a bit philosophical on this, so here, because, I mean, Liverpool, for people will say, like my brother, who's been a Liverpool fan all his life and hasn't seen them win the league in so long, for all these Liverpool fans who've never seen them win anything, this is a bit like kind of a long road to a promised land that you weren't sure you were ever going to reach. And now that they're there, for just to see Liverpool literally picking up the Premier League trophy in Anfield or wherever, the amount of times all these Liverpool fans saw Man United do it, hated the sight of them doing it, and hoped that one day Liverpool would do it. As much as you say it's only a bit of glory, is this not the whole bloody point of it? That we follow these teams because we want them to win stuff, and to then just take that away from them because, you know, it basically we can't finish the season. I think there's a lot more to it than just a little bit of glory, Dan, to be honest.
No, I'm not saying, I'm not.
No, I think it's about finishing the season. I think your point, Johnny, is you want to finish the season at some stage. But Daniel's point is that, you know,
9 games left. I would presume that, like, from a racing perspective, I would imagine in Ireland we will ease back into a behind closed doors situation initially, and I would hope that they'll come up with some situation in Britain where they can do that and maybe run it off very quickly. I know it's Gary Neville spoke about 9 games in 9 days. I mean, I'm sure that's not going to happen, but if they could run it off very quickly, to me, the suggestion that you would just declare the Premier League null and void this season would be an absolute non-starter, and I would totally just want to finish this season and then look at next season afterwards and then a bridged off season, because let's be honest, players are getting a break now as well. They're going to have 6 weeks or whatever without any games, so if the manager isn't telling them to take a week or two off, he's not doing his job. So I think we can definitely work into an abridged season next season, but for me, there's absolutely no question that the league should just stop.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I listen. I accept all those points as fair enough, but like that's okay for now. But like that's, you know, and they do have a plan to resume, and they do have a plan still to try and finish the season by June the 30th. And you know, that's going to lead to a very crowded schedule, and it may well be a closed door schedule. And my attitude would be great. I really hope they can get that done. But you know, if that suddenly isn't possible, it just gets complicated. And I don't know what your preference is. Like, I mean, the season really has to be finished for the season to count. Like, all 38 games have to be played by everyone. Like, would you accept that point, Johnny? Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, they can't be the sort of declared champions because they're ahead. They have to, you know,
absolutely.
Like, all the 38 games have to be played for everyone.
I suppose you could give the clubs the opportunity to, if there were certain dead rubber games, maybe the clubs could agree on a 1-1 draw or something like that, if it absolutely was of no consequence. But yeah, absolutely.
It's a massive relegation battle, though. So like that's the problem. Like, as I said, people are looking at this through the prism of Liverpool, but I think it's the relegation situation.
Absolutely.
That's
and also promotion
complex as
absolutely. And like the championship has been an unbelievable campaign. Obviously the relegation battle is well up in the air. It's been a disappointing Premier League in many respects, but as you say, Dan, and the championship has been utterly riveting. There's so much that could still happen, and I think it'll be a tragedy for everything just to be declared like never happened.
Well, I mean, yeah, tragedy wouldn't be the word, but like, you know, there is, yeah. Like, I mean, we're not, like, people are listening to this for a break from whatever, so we're not going to get into predictions of when things may resume. But I do think, like, the authorities are going to reach a point where they have to say, if action doesn't start by this date, whatever that date may be, then they need to lay out a very firm contingency plan. And as I said, like, these clubs, they're all slave to their TV deals. They're all a slave to the TV markets. And the idea of next season being abridged dramatically won't fly with some people. And I mean, this is like, it comes to a point where, you know, they have to, they can't just keep kicking it on from 2 weeks to 2 weeks to whatever it might be.
But Dan, there's no need for your regular off season here. So basically, the players have had a break. Like, so what's the best case scenario?
Managers won't be like, you know what managers are like, John. If you're a manager of a team that's close to relegation, you won't be encouraging your players to take that much of a break. You know, you'll be saying, be ready. You can be sure they want to be ready to train as soon as they possibly can. There was even talk during the week of Arsenal returning to training. But as John says, the story keeps moving on with West Ham and other cases popping out. But that's, like, you know, people are almost gasping to get back out training because they're afraid that someone else is going to get an edge over them. So this is an off season in theory, but in practice, I don't think mentally it's going to count as one. I don't think that the players' union will count it as.
Okay, suggestion in here from Endicall. Play the rest of the season from December to September. Play the Euros during or after the Africa Cup of Nations next January, and take March onwards as the end of season break. Basically, void the 2021 season before it starts and start afresh in August 2021. I think we're just having a sporting debate here about fixtures and when this will happen and when that will happen. And I think there's a view out there that we should finish, and it could be the case that we start maybe in October. It could be we just don't know what's going to happen with this global pandemic. Public health is the priority. This is only a game. We're talking about it because we're passionate about it every day of our lives, but it is only a game, football, and it is not. Global health is the key. So I just don't know. April the 3rd is when they're going to meet again in the Premier League. April the 30th is the date they suggested they could come back. That's just not going to happen. They could play it in July, they could play it in October, they could play it in December. And it might be the case that, and Johnny, you've got a fair point about you got to finish the job. But the job must be finished after this whole global health issue is under control, and at the moment it is not under control. And we just don't know what's going to happen until then.
Yeah, I think in Ireland, and it is only a game, but it's also an awful lot more than that. I mean, there's an awful lot of money riding on it. This is people's employment, and as much as people's health, obviously, the coronavirus is basically everything at the moment. Industries and all that is going to have to resume at some stage, so that is a concern. But I think, in fairness to our government, and this is something that I think people in football and in sport in general would be very, very conscious of. And I was speaking to horse racing trainers about this. If the horse racing trainer knows exactly what time racing resumes, he'll be able to train his horse accordingly. So if you're training a horse at the moment, but you don't know when he's going to run again, you don't know when racing's on again, you're kind of halfway between training him and not training him. Now, the way the government has dealt with this, to my mind, is that they're doing a staggered approach with the long-term goal in mind. And I think we've a bit more faith maybe here in terms of when sport might resume, because I think we have faith in the way the authorities are leading things. And I think the League of Ireland clubs generally are fairly content with how things are, in the belief that the dates set may be fairly realistic. And I think if we have the next week or two is going to be absolutely key. But if the numbers are fairly in line with projections, I think we can be a lot more bullish about sport resuming at a certain date.
53106, your text messages. Back with more debate after this.
Football on Off the Ball
with Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
The Pat Kenny Show.
We had Alistair Campbell on the show yesterday. You may know that Alistair is a great exponent of the bagpipes, and he posted this for us on Twitter.
There you go, Pat. That'll do for you. On our News Talk tomorrow.
The Pat Kenny Show.
With Jaguar.
Weekdays at 9 a.m. on News Talk.
Well done, Pat. Well done, Alistair. That bagpipe rendition has killed every living thing, including viruses, within earshot of my radio.
How will we rebuild the country whenever the coronavirus crisis ends? In this week's Sunday Independent, the 7 major changes we need to make, plus what the government has to do next. Dr. Ciara Kelly tells you what to expect now if you have COVID-19. In Sunday Property, lift your spirits with our guide for the Grateful Gardener, plus The Secret Life of Anne Doyle and Maura Ryan's New Man. The Sunday Independent. Real stories worth paying for. In print or subscribe at independent.ie.
Lawn moss? Not a problem. Apply Zero Lawn Liquid now in your lawn. I'm Porry Corkin, garden expert on Pat Kenny's programme, and I use Zero Lawn Liquid on my own lawn. Zero kills moss overnight. Zero is easy to apply and very fast acting. Apply Zero to your lawn now for a moss-free, rich green lawn this spring. Zero Lawn Liquid is now available online at horkins.ie for a direct delivery to your home. For a moss-free lawn this spring, apply Zero Lawn Liquid now.
In these uncertain times, we discover the best in each other and in our communities. Your local community pharmacy is working hard in difficult circumstances to supply the medicines you need and the advice you trust. We are asking people to be understanding of small delays and, if possible, phone ahead to make arrangements for collecting your prescription. Your local community pharmacy. Always here for you. Brought to you by the Irish Pharmacy Union.
As a nation, we've been asked to come together by staying apart. At An Post, we're doing everything we can to help you through these unprecedented times. Post offices are remaining open, and deliveries and collections are continuing to operate. Our staff are working tirelessly to maintain services and connect communities all across Ireland. We've introduced special measures to ensure the health and safety of our customers and staff. Together, we can do our part and help each other and our communities. For details, see onpust.com. Onpust, for your world.
COVID-19 is a major public health emergency here in Ireland and around the world. It's having a big impact on the way we live our lives, how we stay connected as communities, and how we use open spaces. If you are planning on heading out into the fresh air, here are 5 things to remember. 1. Stay local, within 2 kilometres of home. 2. Keep a distance of 2 metres from others. 3. Go out with members of your own household only. 4. Always enjoy the outdoors with consideration and respect for the people you meet along the way. And 5. Wash your hands before you leave home, and always observe coughing and sneezing etiquette. Find out more at gov.ie. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
For a limited time only, get Air's totally unlimited broadband for just $29.99 a month for 12 months. Sign up today and you'll also get Amazon Prime Video on us for a whole year. Watch thousands of popular movies, TV episodes, and award-winning Amazon originals. Plus, you'll get the free Air Sport Pack. For more on this amazing offer, call 1-800-500-300, go in store, or visit air.ie. Air. Let's make possible. Price for new customers, 12-month contract, subject to availability. Bundle activation fee may apply. For full details and terms, see air.ie/Prime Video.
In the fight against COVID-19, Ireland's frontline medical staff are having to dig deeper than ever before. So here at Feed the Heroes, we're asking you to dig deeper too. Thanks to your donations, we're already sustaining key frontline workers without the time or facilities to prepare meals. But with the situation rapidly evolving, we need your help to ramp up our efforts. So please, get behind our frontline heroes. Visit feedtheheroes.com and give what you can as soon as you can.
Feed the Heroes, fueling the frontline.
At Electric Ireland, we're here to help 1.2 million homes save on their energy costs by lowering prices from the 1st of April. Every customer will benefit, with up to €100 in annual savings for homes with gas and electricity. That's millions more in pockets across the country. On top of lower prices, our customers will still enjoy a discount rate that doesn't disappear. Find out more about what we're doing for our customers at electricireland.ie, because we're brighter together. Prices valid from 1st of April 2020, subject to change. EAB €1,636, based on average annual consumption, urban 24-hour discounted unit rate, standing charge, PSO levy and carbon tax. Residential, dual fuel, direct debit and online billing. T's and C's apply. See electricireland.ie/EAB. Savings based on annual consumption.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Shearer and Owen.
And you're very welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk with John Duggan until 5 o'clock in the company of Daniel McDonnell from the Irish Independent and Johnny Ward, the broadcaster and journalist. 53106 for your text messages. I just want to say again that we did reference at the start of the show that we understand and appreciate that things are very serious out there right now, and we hope everybody is safe and we hope everybody is keeping well during this public health crisis, this global coronavirus pandemic. When we speak about sport and we speak about football, and sometimes we speak passionately, we're doing that with knowledge of the fact that there is a bigger issue around here. And our debate is because we're sports fans or because we're sports people. And we've hoped that throughout the afternoon, when we've been discussing sports books, when we've been discussing France 1998, and we've been discussing like what's going to happen with the seasons, that's just our passion within the space and obviously cognizant of what's going on out there. So, 53106, guys, don't forget the European places have been determined yet. That's from Paul and Sligo. Do you think the UEFA will come in and ultimately decide what happens to football this season, or it'll be up to each individual league? Something like the Duckworth-Lewis method could be the answer to the English Premier League, etc. Speaking of Liverpool, and we'll get to John Giles in a moment because he spoke about his top Liverpool team of all time, his Liverpool 11. We'll get to that in a moment. But a lot of high-profile footballers have used their wealth and profile for good during this pandemic. Former Chelsea and Everton star Pat Nevin was on the show earlier this week. He said the generosity has always been there, but we just haven't known about it.
You are, because you only get a certain side of it in the media, or you did in the past. Social media has tried to push it. You know, they'll push their own brands, their own personalities, and the good works they've done as well. Having worked inside it for so many years, and from the work with the PFA and work with players, etc., I've watched it for years. It's happened for years, forever, with players. They've helped in various ways. Now, we had it written in the contracts decades ago that there is a certain amount of time that you have to give every week to community You know, and people are amazed at that still. That's in the players' contracts. They should be doing it. And we as a PFA were the ones that were pushing it. You know, we were trying to make sure our players did that. We thought it would help them. But it happens all the time. I went down a little, at the moment, one of my other pastimes, apart from making these LP cover things, is going down these wormholes on YouTube and finding out things. And I was looking for a player the other day, and I found out he'd started a hospital over in Brazil, one of the old Chelsea players. And then I started looking at all these other ex-Chelsea players who I was looking for an article. And the amount of them that have done it, they've all started these different regimes all over the world off their own backs. I had no idea, and I work at that place half the time, and that's just one club. So yes, you're hearing it now, it's great, but it kind of, to a degree, it's all going on. Go and have a look at what Didier Drogba's done over the years, and any other players. It didn't actually need the coronavirus for that to happen, but it's great that that's coming out now, that people are seeing that. I know what some people will think. They're saying a lot of clubs are struggling, the leagues are going struggling, the finances are a mess, even in some of the big companies that are, the Skies or whatever, the BTs, you name it. Well, the players have done quite well over the last number of years, and they should probably put their hands in their pockets and they should do something. And they're absolutely right to think that. The point is they are, and a lot of them are doing it more. It's that difficult thing. It's a very British thing of you do it quietly, and you don't want to be seen to be doing it because it seems to be far too showy. But there's actually nothing wrong with that in these situations that people know. And I've decided that I like Zlatan Ibrahimovic again because I found out what he's doing with the coronavirus, and he's really putting his back into it as well. So it's brilliant to see. But it's not. I mean, I was talking to a random player who I was talking to the other day, Gaetan Bong. You remember him? He played, for Crystal Palace. He's now at Nottingham Forest, right? Yeah. And Bong, a player you hardly know anything about, and he's like Minamino. He's actually stuck in Nottingham now. Family on the wrong continent, but he's stuck. And it's all these stories. But he's still thinking of, well, how can I help the community here? He's only joined that community a month ago, so. I think the vast majority of them have got it. They get it through their heads, and it's great to see and it's great to hear. It's why when I hear slight moan-ups, and people do have a moan-up, and it's part of it, and you have to hold power to account. Yeah, we all understand that. But in the midst of it, remember, there's a lot of good things, and most people, and I include, football associations, etc., they're trying to do the right thing.
53106 for your text messages. Lads, top class show today. Keep it up. Great debating and distraction at the moment. That's from Jason in Crumlin. You talk about Qatar there, Johnny. Will football be more generous when this is all over and when society maybe takes a breath?
Maybe, yeah. I suppose a couple of points. I know you referenced there, John, about, we are conscious of the fact that football, it's only a game and there is a bigger issue. But I think an awful lot of people are looking for something on the radio or on the TV that isn't about the virus, because I think people do need a distraction as well. A second point I'd like to make is that I don't think we've ever had as many compliments coming in about the quality of the show. Maybe we just need no sport to be going on so that people can actually think we're making sense, because we don't get these compliments week to week at all. And the third point you're making, will football be more generous after this? I don't know about that. I mean, the German situation of where the big clubs have pooled their resources together to help the others, I'm not so sure. I mean, players donating to various funds is grand, but these players run enormous money. I think people who are donating 50 quid from their average wage is probably a bigger deal to them. Will football become more generous? I don't know, but I certainly do think that the world will be a better place for having come through this, and I think people will look at how they live their lives. Hopefully they'll live more conscious of maybe not needing to be the consumers that the world maybe demanded of them, and maybe being a bit more conscious about the planet, working from home more often, not travelling unnecessarily, because all these things are ruining the planet. But in terms of football being a more generous sport towards other people, I don't know the answer to that.
Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a tough one because, and I think Pat made some very good points there about, that there's always been that streak within football, but now it almost feels like someone hasn't made a gesture unless it's been hailed on social media, and there's almost like a pressure on them to do it. And you have seen, like, there have been campaigns in recent times where I think of the Ryan McBride one here when, the Derry City player who passed away only, 3 years ago last week. And there was obviously a GoFundMe page, and you would see large amounts from players who played against Seamus Coleman and a few others, and they're not looking for that attention. It's the media who give that attention, but then it almost becomes a pressure. Someone needs to give more, and whereas as Pat said, there's always players been doing this. Didier Drogba, I think even we're talking about the France '98 team. I think quite a few of them, we mentioned they came from sort of immigrant backgrounds, and they would have built stuff in their sort of their sort of spiritual homes as such. I think Vieira would have done stuff, and various people like that. So. And I know what you're saying. They're on massive money, and of course, to them, $5,000 may only be 50 quid to other people, and I get that. But at the same time, a lot of footballers still end up divorced and broke many years from now as well, and you may not know the lifestyle choices and habits they have, which they fritter their money away, so they may not be as rich as you might think. But I know exactly what you're saying, John. Your broader point that you do hope that it leads to a more generous environment, but it's a tough one because sometimes we look at football and assume that it's the greediest people within it are the footballers, but actually, it's a game that generates massive money, and they're probably the ones that should be earning the big money. And sometimes it's not the footballers; it's the other hangers-on, it's the agents, it's where the TV deal goes. They're the ones who are coining big money out of football, and they're the ones, as much as anyone, that needs to take the lead when it comes to whatever example. You mentioned Qatar, and we all know that the World Cup going to Qatar is a dreadful decision, yet we still see footballers going to Qatar to work for massive amounts of money, and people involved in the game. So I don't know what we're looking for. I think Johnny mentions in Germany, the idea of the big clubs helping out the small clubs, and I definitely think that at a time when the game is so uneven, the inequality is crazy, that I guess as an example, you would hope that that if football clubs are struggling, that help can come from within football for them, because we know there's a lot of money being thrown around at the top end of the games, and even the big broadcasters and people like that, any sort of schemes and stuff they can get involved with to help out other smaller elements of the game. That will be good.
Very texty on air on 53106. Just congratulate yourselves on the piece you did some days ago on the history of sport. So interesting. I'm really looking forward to the upcoming pieces your guest spoke about. Keep up the innovations. That's from Jimmy Moore. Lads, a great football book to pick up during the lockdown. Miracle of Castel di Sangro by Joe McGuinness. A wonderful tale of a humble team who made it to Serie B, plus by an author who showed what it takes to be self-sufficient to a hermit-like existence. That's from Dan. Keep up the great work. Really helps me get away from all the harsh about there and makes me think about the future and looking forward to better days. It's not only the big clubs that are helping out. A small club playing in the Leinster Senior League, Seaford Rock United, have donated €2,000 to local charities at this time of need. This money was excess subs and player donations. That is from Robbie in Arklow. About 1998, it was our focus between 3 and 4 of our World Cup year. With Danny and John, Dan and Johnny. I was working in an Irish bar in Spain during World Cup 98. 2 Americans came into the bar when England were playing Tunisia. They loved the buzz and cheered their hearts out for England. They came back a few days later to see the USA-Iran game and were expecting the English lads to return the favour. They were horrified to see a pub full of Irish and English roaring for Iran. Poor guys. That's from Noel in Dublin. And Coventry City have more to lose than Liverpool, currently 5 points clear with the game at hand. Haven't won the league since 1953, promote all in current positions, relegate no one, relegate 2 additional teams from each league the following season. Not a bad suggestion there. Liverpool team that John Jaws picked during the week, I thought this was very good, actually. There's not much I would disagree with here. His Liverpool 11 of all time. Ray Clements in goal, a back 4 of Tommy Smith, Virgil van Dijk, Alan Hansen and Andy Robertson. The midfield, 3 of them, Stephen Gerrard, Graham Souness and John Barnes. And then up front, Kenny Dalglish, Ian Rush and Kevin Keegan.
Yeah, quite a good team, Johnny. I don't know. What you think?
I find these teams absolutely impossible because it's impossible to compare genres with genres, decades with decades. The likes of the Liverpool team of the 80s, if they were thrown in to play the Liverpool team right now, and even if they were at their peak, they'd be absolutely hockey because football has moved on and evolved so quickly. But I don't think that's a bad team. I was a little bit too young, as much as I fully remember all these World Cups we're talking about, and I'm probably at middle age now. I was a bit too young to see Suey in all his glory. I've seen some of his tackles on on YouTube and all that. But no, it sounds a fairly, if you were to pick the best Liverpool team, you'd probably start from this team backwards, because I think this team genuinely has played in an era, obviously, because football is moving on. They're playing a different tempo of football. But yeah, I wouldn't disagree with many of those players, to be honest. I think it's a fair shout by Giles.
I think I did a piece recently on the Irish kids that were at Liverpool in 1990. The guys like Mark Kenny and Davy Collins, and the younger guys, John Carroll, Tony Cousins, who didn't really play. But the one thing that did come back to me, I spoke to them about that team, was how underrated Ronnie Whelan was. And actually, when Ronnie Whelan got injured, they really missed him. And I know that's sort of a patriotic slant to put on that team there. But what midfield three is Souness, Gerrard and Barnes. I mean, Barnes. It's not a bad team, to be fair. Yeah, John Barnes. I mean, it's not a bad old team, you know. But I think you do get the sense that maybe Ronnie might be slightly underrated by history, and that's going from people who trained and played with him every day. That would have been a view they had, that when he got injured around 1991, and that also had an impact on Liverpool around that time. So I'd suggest he should be in the squad anyway.
I think we had so many good players around that time as well, and considering since Roy Keane has left the fray, I suppose we've really struggled in midfield for that proper player. But in Ronnie Whelan's day, like, we had proper players, and even going back to Brady and Giles and all that, we had serious world class midfielders, and it's funny watching back some of these old games because it's giving you ample time. You look at not only the players, obviously the Irish contingent that Liverpool had, but some of the players Ireland had at their disposal and what might have been. But anyway,
well, in 1990, Ronnie Whelan, if he'd been fit, would have been possibly a big game changer for Ireland in that World Cup. 53106 here, Xabi Alonso all day long for me, fellas. Could run a game unlike Gerrard. I was thinking myself.
I would agree with that.
I was thinking myself, maybe Emlyn Hughes defensively, or Alan Kennedy back in the day. But I couldn't really, like, from the midfield and forwards on, it's very hard to argue with his team that he did pick. But Ronnie Whelan was, like, when you think about it, he was captain Liverpool in 1989. They were league champions the previous year and the following year. And I just think that, I don't know whether Jack, maybe preferred Andy Townsend at the time.
He never suited Jack. He never really suited Jack's style, did he? I mean, that was the thing that I sometimes think, even in the debate of the great Irish players, he gets, people talk about the goal in '88, brilliant goal from a long throw, but actually, you would sense that Ronnie, from speaking to him at times, and like that era could have been different for him. It definitely could have been different for him if they'd played in a slightly different way.
Lads, stay safe. Hope you keep well and consume a lot of sports documentaries and books now over the next while, and I'm sure we'll have a great chat and a debate again next week.
Yeah, you too, John. Everyone listening as well.
Yeah, and just on that, John, I know this is pretty hard going for people, even the people who are perfectly healthy but are locked up. But just imagine if this were a time before you had access to everything you'd want on YouTube and all these amazing documentaries and all this stuff that you can watch. Imagine if you went back 25, 30 years where all you had was maybe a couple of channels on TV and a book and a paper at home. We're very, very lucky to have access to so much that we have.
Yeah, Johnny, well said, and thanks for your contribution today, and for Daniel McDonnell as well. Don't forget the sports books that we had on the Saturday panel. You can get them on offtheball.com, the review of that with Owen Sheehan, Arthur O'D and Neil Treacy, and also on our podcast network. And then the debate between the lads on France 1998. That is also available on the Off the Ball social channels later on. So Off the Ball back tomorrow from 1 o'clock until 5 o'clock. Joe Malloy is in the hot seat. We'll have the paper review, we'll have Golf Weekly, and we'll be speaking to Matt Holland about his career. Be sure to tune in then. Thanks for listening to us today. Please stay safe. Bye-bye till then.